Next delegate is Shelley Comer. Give us one quick sec. We're just going to make sure the station's ready for you here. And you can come forward. The only thing I'm going to ask of you is, you have 5 minutes, but the only thing I'm going to ask of you is to make sure you speak towards that red microphone in front of you, just because a few folks in the chamber don't have the best hearing, so they really need the technology to help them hear.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sounds good. So, I'm here to speak on the cooling. It's item 8, motions from members of council. Item 8.1, motions for discussion and decision, cooling equipment in rental units, submitted by Councillor Henderson and Councillor Nakagawa. And it addresses the fact that during the heat dome in 2021, there were 28 deaths in Westminster, and it was because the temperature in the units for those tenants, mostly tenants, I would imagine, was too high, and there was no way to cool their unit, and so they died. And for every one of those people that died, there's also a lot of tenants that were suffering and that were ill and that maybe even would have to go to the hospital. And so what Nadine and Tasha want to do, I know them by first name because they come to some events sometimes, like I met Nadine at the street festival. I know they're spearheading this action. And I know that they have, to a certain degree, reached out to tenancy organisations to find out what the heck's going on. Tenancy organisations have found, because Nadine's a renter, the only tenant on the whole council, she listens, she wants to know what is happening with tenants in the city. She recognises that 55% of the residents of New Westminster live in a rental unit. So you guys know, this is ground zero for rentals, for tenancy laws, because whatever is going bad in the world of tenancy in BC, this is ground zero, and it's a microcosm, okay, of the whole city. And it's very distressing to think that there are landlords who have business licenses that were granted by this city, who would rather see tenants suffer and die than allow them to have an air conditioning unit in their suite. And you think, why the heck would that be? When there's like a BC government program with partnership with BC Hydro, where tenants can get an air conditioning unit installed in their unit, and what's more, it will all be done properly, and you know, it's the program, and that yet there's tenants that can't even get the problem with the program, by the way, this is why we need this motion to be passed. The problem with that is, like what the program from BC government is, that it just assumes that every landlord is going to say, yeah, for sure, no problemo, get, put one in. But that's not what's happening is, and I think that there's a lot of landlords that are like that, but there's landlords that are predatory landlords in this city operating under BC license, your New Westminster City license, that refuse to give tenants an air conditioning unit, and my landlord is one of them. There's no even any point in me asking my landlord to sign the approval form that's part of the BC government programme, landlord's permission. He won't sign it. So some landlords spoil it for all the rest. So henceforth, we have to have this motion passed to drag the landlords who are predatory landlords, kicking and screaming, to take care of the tenants' property. They don't want the tenants to be comfortable. Some of those tenants, the most vulnerable, have lived in their units for years and years and years. They're paying a third of the amount in rent of new tenants coming into the building after the landlord's done a lick and a promise and lipstick on a pig. So there's great motivation for a landlord not to give tenants air conditioning units. I hope everybody thoroughly understands that. Councillor Fontaine, it doesn't help to give low-income tenants in the city a $500 cheque and tell them to go and buy an air conditioning unit. It's not that. It's much, much, much more complicated than that.
Sorry, I have to ask you to wrap up.
Which
5
is
minutes.
why we need this motion passed. Thank you, Tasha. Thank you for all your hard work, Nadine. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Shelley.
Tenants' rights.
Well, folks, I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you to not applaud to delegates, even if you love what they say. I don't like people booing delegates. I don't like people applauding delegates because it might have the same effect. Someone might want to come up and have a contrary opinion and they don't want to feel like they're not supported in the room. So we try to make it neutral so that everybody has an equal amount of support, okay? It's just, we want to make sure everyone feels respected when they come up here to speak. So please don't applaud. Thank you. Councillor Fontaine, did you have a question?
Question for the delegate, if
You may come forward if there's a question for you, yes.
yes, and I had the question ready to go prior to your comment about the $500, so it wasn't triggered as a result of that. The question I have for you is, you're talking about a program for which you have to get paperwork signed and approved, and then your landlord. So I understand that program, but and then you said subsequent to that you didn't like the initiative that I brought forward, which would have given you, for example, the cash to buy your air conditioner. So in the case where you have the cash to buy your own air conditioner, do you need to still get your landlord's approval? It's in your tenancy agreement? Okay,
No. There's nothing in my tenancy agreement.
Right.
But that landlord has given notices in all of the buildings threatening one tenant, Ryan Laniel. He's been in the news. He's got the same landlord I do. Andrew has the same landlord I do. He's going to speak too. So what it is it's like if you plug, first of all, the building won't take it. The building can't handle it, air conditioning units, right? So you put your air conditioning unit in, and if you plug it in, you're in breach of your tenancy because the building won't take it. So then what you would have to do, Councillor Fontaine, you plug in your air conditioning unit, you use it, and you wait for your eviction notice, which you may or may not get. And then when you get your eviction notice, you file a dispute with the RTB. You wait months and months and months because it's not you wait a few months, okay, to get a hearing date. And then you have to go pay the $100 filing fee. Eventually, you would probably win. You know, if you get a city inspector report from electrical report to say, yeah, the building can handle it. But I mean, why do you have to go through all that sweat and tears? And the fact of the matter is not every tenant with a problem disputes all the way to the RTB. Tiny, tiny percentage, like 15% or something ridiculous, you know. Anyway, so I hope that answers your question.
Somewhat, yeah. I'm just trying to clarify, whether or not you using an air conditioner in your unit, whether or not that triggers an eviction, which I understand they can't evict you based on just plugging in an air conditioner, as you indicated. It would be very odd scenario for the RTP to support that. So I understand it would be a lot of work. But
once the eviction notice is served, it's questionable, first of all, that the odds are that the tenant's not going to dispute it. So the landlord might win there. The odds are great. Then when you go to the RTB, it's all at the discretion of the arbitrator, you know. Lately, arbitrators seem to be more millennials rather than pearl-clutching seniors. Hate to say it, but the climate's changing, but it's not changing quick enough, and it shouldn't be like taking a suitcase full of cash to Las Vegas when you go before the RTB, because you don't know what kind of arbitrator you're gonna get, but I suspect you would win. But it's a lot of stress and strain on a tenant to have to go through all that.
Okay, and we're gonna talk about, I'm not gonna leave the debate for later, because we're gonna debate that later tonight. But the
Sure.
last question I have is,
Yeah.
I heard you mention that the building wouldn't take it. So is it your understanding that if everybody plugged in an air conditioner, in, I don't know how old your building is, but if they plugged it in, there's a potential wiring issue or a electrical issue? Is that what?
The notice from the landlord, and I know Andrew's got a different one. Due to the landlord's insurance obligations, management cannot authorize any tenants to install AC units. If a tenant chooses to breach this material term of the tenancy and it creates damages, the tenant will be liable for rectifying these damages. You see the wording? So it carries on. Older buildings are not equipped to maintain the high usage of electricity. Air conditioners require. You are expected to personally confirm with an electrician the safety of usage on any equipment before initiating usage. There will be now it falls to you guys, okay? This is how it's done. There will also be cooling venues opened by the city, and can be confirmed on the city website.
Thank you. I just want to limit folks to answering the questions that are actually asked. Sorry. Thank you.
I hope that clarified for your council.
Thank you. The next delegate is Andrew Evans. Give us 1 minute, Andrew. We're just going to make sure the station's ready for you. Thank you. And just ask you to follow Shelley's excellent example and make sure you speak towards the microphones that folks can hear you. Thanks.
I probably won't be as impassioned as Shelley, but I love her dearly. I've got it just all written down. So, hello, Mayor Johnston and esteemed.
Sorry, could you just move the mic? You can even move the mic a little closer, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll speak up.
Yeah.
So I wanted to speak to you today about an ongoing concern within our community regarding rental units and air cooling. Specifically, a recent incident where air conditioning was brought forward within our media as a hot topic issue. If you'll pardon the pun. Am I too quiet?
You might want to, as loud as you can be, maybe.
Okay. So as you know, the province worked with BC Hydro this year to provide air conditioning units to low-income residents in an effort to combat the worsening heat issue that has become more difficult and dangerous for those most at risk within our community. While the greater issue of climate change impacts all of our lives, this group has the least amount of resources available to them to protect themselves from the health issues that come from living in hotter accommodations. They are also a greater population of people that do not always have transportation options available to them to get to the cooling centers that Shelley mentioned previously and be able to help provide relief from these elements. I bring these issues up as during the media reports, there was a notice mentioned that was issued by a landlord of many rental units of where I also reside and received this notice that advised these tenants that they were not to put in these units, and more specifically, the window units. They didn't, he spoke partially to the portable ones, but specifically the window units. Meaning my landlord, he would not agree also in this context to help those most at risk to provide a cooling option. This is a growing concern as our housing is being purchased at an increasing rate, by which I can describe as predatory investors in an effort to enrich themselves off of one of the greatest cornerstones that helped us create the society we have enjoyed until now, and that's affordable housing. I mention this as the issue of air conditioning, cooling options is of great importance to demonstrate how we treat the most vulnerable among us, while they're also placed in a situation that could and has created great suffering, as you know, unfortunately leading to citizens in New Westminster dying during the heat dome of several years ago. This is where our council comes in. The influence you wield could be instrumental in working with the province to ensure that they create legislation that will protect all levels of renters. who are feeling a greater growing economic pressure to survive on top of the impact that climate change is also giving to them. My worry is that this legislation that they do create could also be used as a detriment for those renters that landlords could look at. The capital upgrades needed for improving units as a reason to renovate tenants or potentially do so, and speak to that legislation that is being crafted on the provincial level as their justification for doing so. That won't help those in our society that are at greatest risk of becoming homeless once they lose the housing that they already have. We, the average citizen, and you as well on the council, obviously have responsibility to protect those among us from the outlying forces that seek to enrich themselves, rather than help create a better future amongst the growingly bleaker path that is currently in front of us, and more speak to the greater economy. To use this influence you have to hold the province to account in creating better laws, we also avoid the precedents that landlords, like the one I have, has in using the gray areas of these laws to their advantage while holding their tenants to a potentially even more difficult black and white within them. We need to balance these issues as well, and I do understand that as there is a risk associated with installing air conditioning and improving rental units without gaining a financial benefit, the ways that we do that lies with politicians like yourselves that we elected to seek that balance. A suggestion I might make in that doing so, we should look at the difference between how a small landlord and the investors operate and create rules based on these differences. How that risk that a small landlord takes is governed so that they are more willing to rent out their basement units, laneway units, and the like, while also gaining tax rebates and improving them to ensure the safety of tenants during future heat waves. The same for the larger rental corporations that may take larger risks but have more to gain. How do we separate these entities in a manner that will also benefit them and create a greater society by creating more rental stock that is even safer to occupy in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I don't see any questions for you from council, so thank you for your presentation. I think I left your light on. Sorry. The next delegate is Ryan Laniel. Like I said, give us 1 minute here. I'm just going to clean up the station. Is Ryan in the building?
I don't think he's here.
And we just want to make sure he's not zooming in and online. We don't have anyone in his, Okay, if he shows up by the end, we can put him at the end of the list. That would make Jessica Gillis next.
Hi, so nice
Hello.
to see you guys in a formal setting.
Okay, thanks. You have 5 minutes, and please, again, speak towards the red mic. Thank you.
Okay, you got it. So I'm coming here to talk about the same issue, but I have a little bit of a different take on it. So I am a renter, and I'm very fortunate that I have been able to purchase an air conditioner in my home. But I cannot tell you how blessed that I have been to have this air conditioner in my home. And I have actually brought in some of the seniors in my building into my unit during a lot of these very difficult extreme weather times. And they have really enjoyed it, and it's helped them out a lot. One of the things that there's 28 deaths, but that's 2 years ago. This is 2 years ago. Like, I think this is something that we really need to push now. One of the things that I had actually suggested to my landlord is to create the common room, have an area for people to have a cooling station within our building. The closest cooling station that we have is the public library, and that is about a 20-minute walk away. For a senior, that's a bit much in, 30 to 35 plus degree weather. So I do appreciate that you guys are doing your best and the city staff is doing their best. However, I think that there's more that we can do. So as someone, I would really like to see some work with a lot of the landlords to create some spaces within their buildings, maybe not just their units themselves or mandate having air conditioners in their units, but we have a wonderful common area in my building where we have internet, we have spaces to sit, we have a kitchen in there. It could be utilized. The landlord won't utilize that unless they're actually told to do that. So that's my suggestion that I'm coming here to discuss, but also I have a really interesting stat that you probably already know. According to the Canadian Climate Institute, extreme heat in BC could double by 2030, and that could almost cost $12 billion. So it's just a thought to put in your heads, but I would really appreciate more push on this, more urgency on this, because we are now sitting here at the end of summer, and there's not really much we can do at that point, so it would be really, really appreciative. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will just note that we did have a report last council, but yeah, oh, sorry, I've got other folks here speaking, so maybe I won't put myself in the place. Councillor Campbell.
I think I'm going to finish your sentence because
Okay.
we actually have a report that's come back to us in today's council meeting that speaks to what you're saying. I'm going to use the term one cool room. So having an air conditioner in one room in a multi-unit building. So I think it would be helpful if staff nodding in the back there, Brad, with fire maybe connected with you, because I know they're looking for buildings to sign up on this. And if you take a look at the report, and I'm happy to email it to you if you can't find it, because sometimes it's complicated. There's other tactics that are being used, including the Senior Services Society, who has a bus, is looking at potentially taking seniors to cooling centers. So yeah, I thank you for coming, and I think it would be great if you connected with our fire, I can't remember your title, Aaron, very important fire person. He's got his business card there.
The other thing to remember is a lot of seniors don't have access to a lot of this information that you're providing.
You're
So
right.
It's up to people like myself that have printed off a lot of this stuff, put it up in our common areas, because a lot of seniors just don't have access to internet and stuff like that. So as much as you can bring things up and say things, we need to find a better way to communicate this to a lot of seniors. And I really don't want to have to come out of my building at midnight one night and see, you know, an 85-year-old sitting on the sidewalk in her walker because it's too hot in her unit.
Yeah.
So
And we hear you, and I think you should read that report, because there's quite a bit of accelerated actions that are occurring to make sure that we get, well, we are already proactive, but we do more. So yeah, please do. Maybe we can, I know you volunteer all over this town, so maybe it's something you can get involved with. So thank you. Yeah, and the Aaron is right behind you, so don't miss him on your way out.
That's
thank you.
the fella in the uniform.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, I see him.
Thank you. Councillor McAvoy.
Oh,
You know what we need, right, Jessica? Do you remember?
we need urgency. That's what we need right now is urgency.
Urgency.
Thank you. Councillor Fontaine.
Jessica, don't run off too quickly. You're very popular tonight. Yes, I 100% agree. We need urgency. It's been 2 years since the heat dome, and we're talking about this, as you said, post.
At the end of summer,
at the end
2
of
years
summer.
later.
So 100% agree with you. Can you comment a little bit about, like, while I like the idea of cooling centers, I think they're good during the day if they can be installed. How do you, from your perspective, how do you deal with someone who's a senior who has to, like we all do, go to sleep at night, and the heat and the temperature within their room in the nighttime is oppressive? Because the cooling center might work during the day when people are awake, but how, like, what do you think we could or should be doing to deal with seniors who are clearly going to be impacted by the heat at nighttime when they're going to bed?
I think there's a lot of things that can be done. I've been trying to educate a lot of seniors too about things like, you know, perhaps having a cool bath before they go to bed, but also they're seniors. So there's limited ways that they can do this as well. One of the things that I've mentioned to my second floor senior that lives above me is to keep her windows and doors closed during the day so that it maintains the coolness in her apartment, and then open them up in the evening when it starts to get cool out. I have an in-window air conditioner. I have offered it to some of these people as well, but I can't help everybody, right? So I'm only one person with one machine.
Okay, I asked the question because I think we have to come up with solutions that
Yeah.
will allow people to sleep at night and to be able to be in a temperature where their body can be not overheating post the cooling center during the day. And I think that's another
Yeah.
complication to the cooling center that happens once people have to go to bed.
Right.
So, thank you.
Thank you. You can now go. Thanks. Our next delegate is Margaret Wanioki. And you'll have to tell me whether I pronounced that correctly or not.
Yeah, that's my name, Margaret Wanyuike.
When you're okay?
Yeah, Wanyuike.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, please talk towards the mic. Thank you. You have
Okay,
5
thank
minutes.
you so much. I just want to say that I'm a renter. I'm a single mother of 3, one who who is asthmatic, who has been affected by the climate change. And my issue here is about the same issue about the cooling station, which is very, very far from us. And we cannot access it due to so many reasons for the way that my kids has been bullied at school. So even to go to the cooling station is a torture to them. So the cooling station that I can just recommend is about the way that the landlord has been given so much power because you cannot ask anything from the landlords. My thing is, my thing is like if the motion can be passed for the landlord to be responsible for the cooling station, for the cooling inside the building, which has been so limited to us, because when you go out, outside because of the climate change, smoke and everything, my daughter is attacked by the smoke, and now I have to be in and out from the hospital. And another thing is about the way that we have been in the building, which has been with so many seniors who have been dying now and then. Even we corrected one of the senior who died recently because he's so old, he's over 80, and no one who was with him. So my work is just only to go to meet them and to check on them, because that is how I just love to help. And the thing is, I stayed like 3 days when I got to a smell that my senior who was living the next door, he stayed three days because of the heat. And that has been like a torture even from the people who are living inside the building, because that is the way that I'm working with the seniors who have been in torture, because I call it torture. I call it torture because they don't have the access, like the way the last speaker was just saying, like even to move from one place to another, they cannot access the cooling station, which actually with they are accessible just only that is in daytime, but on nighttime, and that is the way that I have to hold them from upstairs to downstairs so that I can walk around. I just live even around at 1, just moving them because they don't have someone to move them. And that is the way that I'm feeling like, I don't feel good. I feel bad when I see some seniors dying. My kid is there, who is asthmatic, who cannot be able to withhold when you're just closing all the windows because of the smoke. Now this is a heat which is running. She's only crying day and night. And that is my thing, that the motion, if it can be passed for the landlord to be responsible and them to be lowered, to lower the powers, because they are so rude. I can just say they are so rude, and that is the way I don't know why, because they have more powers than the renters, and when you refuse even to pay the rent on time, they always issue the letter for you to move out from their apartment. But when you are just telling them just only for the cooling units, for the rooms to be cool, that is the issue for them. My thing is them for the cooling station, it's supposed to be 100%. People are dying. People are dying. And my other thing is, if the councillors, you can avail yourself just to come and visit the unit, like even if it's after 3 years, even if it's just only a day, even if it's just after 1 year, you can see how we are living. We are living in a place you cannot even call a home. That is how we are living. If you can just only annually, just 1 day, you just come visit, in some apartments. We are living in hell. And that is my thing. Just pass the motion for them to be responsible for the police station. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and telling us what your experience. Oh, I have Councillor Campbell.
So Monica, thank you for speaking. I'm sorry to hear about the cooling station is not, comfortable or safe you feel for your family. I think that I was gonna say it's a coincidence that we have a report here on the accelerated heat response, but I think it's more than a coincidence. I think this is the issue of, that is just, it's gonna be an issue until we deal with it. It's not just, oh, this happens to be another heat-related report. It's here, it's prevalent, and it's of a concern. So I do feel that it is timely that Brad Davey is here, our deputy fire chief, and I encourage you to connect with him as well, because I know they are looking at different buildings to see how they can assess them, support you. So please do not leave. I hope, Brad, you brought a whole bunch of cards. So please do not leave without connecting with our deputy fire chief. And your invitation to visit, I think, is ideal for Brad and his team to visit, because I don't know what to do. But we have people here that know what to do. So I think they're the more important people to visit you than a politician right now. So please connect with Brad. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for your time for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Monica Bandari. Thanks. Yeah, you only get, there's two of you, you only get 5 minutes to share, but there's two mics. So we give you two mics, but only the same amount of time. Please speak
Okay,
closely
no
to them.
problem.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Monica Bandari. I'm here today as the chair of New West Acorn, which is the Association of Communities Organized for Reform Now. We're a multi-use, membership-based community union of low and moderate income people. I'm here today to speak to Acorn's support of the motion submitted by Councillor Henderson and Councillor Nakagawa regarding cooling equipment being required in rental units. As we learned in 2021, air conditioning can be a matter of life and death, especially for vulnerable residents of our city. The majority of Acorn members in New West are renters, and we've been hearing reports of people being denied access to air conditioning by their landlords. Over the last few months, as a program by BC Hydro, which has been spoken about already, to deliver 8,000 units within a 3-year time span, free AC to low-income residents was being rolled out. Many people faced barriers to accessing the free ACs because their landlords weren't willing to sign the consent forms that was necessary to apply. Several residents of New West expressed at Acorn meetings that they hadn't tried to apply for the provincial free AC program because they were worried about approaching their landlord to sign the consent form, or felt confident that their landlord wouldn't agree to sign the form. This goes to show that without interventions from the city, many tenants, including the most vulnerable members of our community, are not going to be able to access life-saving air conditioning. We don't leave it up to the landlord's goodwill or tenant advocacy to make sure that rental units have access to heat, electricity, or clean water. So why should it be up to the individual landlords to decide if their tenants will have access to safe temperatures in the summer? On another note, Acorn in Hamilton, Ontario has been pushing a campaign to fight for a maximum heat bylaw at City Council that would mandate the adequate and suitable cooling should be provided and maintained by the landlord. Work is still ongoing, but Hamilton Acorn has seen unanimous support from Council to have the development of the bylaw be in priority for Council in 2024. Here in New West, we have a history of leading the way when it comes to supporting renters. We did that with the renoviction bylaw and with the residential rental tenure zoning. By passing this motion tonight and implementing this bylaw a priority, we would once again be a trailblazer when it comes to protecting renters and the most vulnerable members of our community. We may be out of the woods for this summer, but with the effects of climate change getting more and more serious every year, we need fast action on these issues to protect renters next summer and in all the years to come. So all we're seeking today is your leadership in finding more information to save lives. Save the lives of your constituents, because that is what is on the line when these temperatures hit their peak. And that is what these constituents voted you in for. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of potential questions from council. Councillor McAvoy.
You know what we need, right?
Rights,
Rights.
rights,
What kind of rights?
tenant rights.
Tenants' rights.
Tenants' rights.
Exactly, thank you.
Okay, I heard urgency and tenants' rights. Thank you. Councillor Fontaine.
I'm not sure if that was a question by Councillor McAvoy that I
No,
could
I
talk,
don't think
but I
it
think it
was.
was more of a statement, but anyways, I do have a couple questions. Just in reference to Acorn's position around, we had 2 years, as Jessica indicated, since the heat domes. We're going on to now the 3rd year since the heat dome. And in that time, the province had the opportunity to create an air conditioner program, and it just got launched this spring. And it did not come with the accompanying legislation to prevent a landlord from denying you or anyone else access to an air conditioner. Can you comment on whether or not you think that was the right approach in terms of that particular program and accessing it, and its requirement that you, because from what I understand, you are required to, as a tenant, through this program, to actually go to your landlord and get the signature versus being able to have the funding directly provided to you without requiring a landlord's access or a landlord's approval?
Yeah, so, I mean, we were happy initially when we heard about the program being rolled out, although there was a lot of issues with it. Basically, as already been discussed, I think the numbers are that only 360 of those free ACs were installed at this point, and we still are hearing a lot from people who are facing barriers. I think, it's a lot of different things need to happen. There needs to be provincial action, but there also needs to be, changes made at the city level like we're discussing tonight, for sure. I think, all approaches need to happen simultaneously so that we can protect people.
Okay, so I guess I'm just trying to get clarity. Do you take the position that the province, by rolling out the air conditioner program, should have also accompanied that rollout with some regulation or legislation to prevent the landlord from stopping you from having access to the air conditioner program? I guess is what I'm trying to clarify, what Acorn's position is.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed it at several meetings. I think we are in support of a provincial change that would make basically disallow landlords from banning air conditioning in their tenancy agreements. And that would be great to see from the province. But, in the meantime, I think as previous speakers have mentioned, I mean, whenever there's something that's legislated through the Residential Tenancy Act, actually applying it can mean a really stressful situation for renters, going to the RTB, waiting for those hearings. That can be a big barrier. So with this landlord licensing program that the city has, it'd be great to see that addressed at the city level as well.
Okay, and the last, actually two other questions. The question I have is around the program itself, to be able to access funds, to be able to purchase the air conditioner. Are you aware of tenants that would have been able to have installed it had they not been required to go to their landlord first and get the funding? And then, like if they were able to get the funding directly from the province of British Columbia without the landlord's approval, are you aware of tenants that would have been able to access air conditioners this summer as a result of that?
Sorry, so your question is, are we aware of?
Well, so tenants who would have been able, like I'm hearing stories tonight and throughout the community of tenants who have to go to their landlord because this program requires them to go and get their landlord's approval to get access to the funding for the air conditioner. What I'm asking is, if we didn't have that step where the province forced you to go to your landlord and get authorization, but just provided you with the funding to actually purchase your air conditioner, are you aware of tenants that would have been able to access air conditioners without having to go to their landlords and seek approval? That's what I'm trying to seek some information from you.
I mean, I'm sure there are some people out there. There probably are some people who would be able to access AC if they just got the funding. But I think what we've also heard from a lot of people, more, the larger chunk of people, is that either there's fear that there'd be retaliation from their landlord for having an air conditioner, or there's actual knowledge that the landlord, as has previously been spoken about, has made attempts to ban air conditioning. So I think that would be the larger majority of people would face fears from that aspect of it.
It just poses an additional barrier that doesn't need to be there. It's not as if the landlord themselves are paying the hydro bill. And it's not as if getting this AC unit requires a permanent change within the apartment to accommodate that.
Okay, and my last question on that note is if the building does require a wiring upgrade, if the landlord can demonstrate that it would require some kind of an electrical upgrade, are you in favor, is Acorn in favor of the province creating a kind of an infrastructure fund or something to help if that is required by the landlord to make those upgrades, with the understanding that there would be no renovictions and that there would be nobody removed from the building, that everyone would be able to either remain or come back into that unit?
I think, we'd have to take that back to membership and get their thoughts on it. I don't think we have like a unified position on that at this time, but
That's good.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Brook Jensen. Give us a quick sec to get the station set up for you, Brook. Hello. Thank you. Just remember the microphones are in front of you, and yeah, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Brook Jensen. I'm a volunteer with the new Westminster Tenants Union. Just before I get started, 2 quick notes on what people have said before. I just want to say, regarding the notice Shelley brought up, whether legal or not, I spoke to tenants who weren't installing ACs because they were worried about that notice. And just if landlords want subsidies for upgrading their buildings, they should demonstrate that they need them, given what they're currently charging for rent. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. I wanted to present the results of a survey we did starting in August of our members about the question, should landlords be responsible for cooling? And I'm here to present a summary of the results of that survey. 27 renters responded. All but 1 voted yes, that landlords should be responsible for cooling. Of the 26 yeses, 6 selected that their yes came with questions or concerns about how it would be implemented. Not surprisingly, the reasons given for yes all related to personal health and safety. One said the fire department got a reading of 51 degrees from her apartment. Her husband had a sunstroke. Another was a senior living alone who suffered nausea and fatigue during the heat despite her own attempts to cool the apartment. One family spent over $1,000 on fans, blinds, and air conditioning just to make their apartment hospitable in the summer. They said that shouldn't be the minimum for a habitable apartment. More than one had a neighbor die in their building in the last heat dome. And our respondents did not believe that the solutions to this crisis could be enacted on an individual scale. Multiple tenants told us that their personal air conditioning units still struggle to control heat in the summer. A sustainable solution requires building upgrades, more curtains in public spaces, black torch on white painted roofs, heat pumps which offer greater efficiency. All solutions tenants in our survey believes were necessary that can only be implemented by their landlords. And many landlords in these older buildings may not act without facing real pressure or consequences. Multiple respondents told us that their landlords did not allow tenants to operate air conditioners in the summer, despite previous record-breaking heat waves. One had that condition written into their lease, and while their current owner didn't enforce it, they fear what might happen when the building is sold. One low-income tenant who can't afford their own AC applied to the BC Hydro program to get a free air conditioner, but their landlord wouldn't sign the consent form. Given their landlord's behavior and other issues, they suspect it's a way to pressure them out of their apartment so they can put it back up on the market at a significantly higher rent. Concerns about a cooling bylaw almost all focused on how landlords would react. Will landlords use this as an excuse to evict their tenants on the ground that they need vacancies to do the upgrades? Would they use the new provincial above guideline rent increase law to pass the costs onto their long-term tenants? How will we hold landlords accountable if they don't follow this law? Quote, our landlords neglect other issues of health and safety already, one respondent said. How will the city ensure tenants' needs are met? Another told us, quote, our landlord barely fixes items that break, let alone upgrade our heating system. One senior told us her landlord was pumping heat into their suites during the heat wave and only stopped when a reporter from CTV News got involved. But all these concerns come from people who still believe it ought to be the landlord's responsibility. Even the one respondent who identified as both a tenant and a landlord said so. To give voice to the one respondent who said no, their only reason given was, I believe it should be the tenant's responsibility. You've heard themes of affordability, economies of scale, power, and safety, but there's one last theme from the responses that I believe is equally important. justice. And for this, I'll quote one respondent who gave permission to share their words, but asked to remain anonymous. Quote, "Rent is not a salary. It is money that is meant to be returned into the building through upkeep and maintenance, including making sure tenants don't burn or freeze to death during seasonal extremes. If a tenant dies due to heat-related causes in a rental property, the responsibility ought to fall on the negligence of the landlord to ensure their building is safe for human habitation. Simple as that. If they cannot provide these basic conditions, they do not deserve the title of landlord. The ability to be a landlord should be a privilege, something someone studies and gets a license for. Human lives are at stake, and we are entrusting them to people who have no urgency to do even basic repairs, who are attempting to ban air conditioners rather than invest in upkeeping their building. It's abhorrent the contempt some landlords feel for their tenants who they feel they aren't making enough money from. Enough is enough. Landlords ought to be held responsible for climate control in their properties at the very least." Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I don't have any questions from council, so thank you. Our final delegate will be Rick Vugteveen. Give us a quick second here. Small technical problem with the station. Don't worry, we'll be right back. Just trying to keep you safe, Rick.
Thanks. I'm good if it's a problem.
You have 5 minutes, and please be aware of the mics in front of you. The red light.
All right, thank you very much. So my name is Rick Vugteveen. I'm here representing the Brown Hill Residents Association, and I'm speaking to the kind of a cooling equipment bylaw in rental units. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I know it's a lot of time that we've been speaking about this, and I think it's always helpful we can go and do this kind of in person and have this discussion and kind of hear from so many residents. So before I get into the kind of cooling bylaw specifically, maybe an update on the Brow of the Hill Residents Association. So some of you may know that the Brow RA was dormant, starting with COVID, and took a while to go and kind of get back and up and running. I'm happy to go and report that we had a kind of a relaunch meeting in July that was very well attended. Over 30 residents kind of showed up, which is the most that's attended in quite a while. We asked for members to go and come forward to be on the board of the RA, and we had actually more than we needed. So we're at the maximum size of our board. So we are back, very happy about that. Councillor Henderson was able to go and kind of attend that meeting, and I think that may have been helpful just to go and hear some of the issues that are kind of coming up from the residents. There was a lot around traffic, trees, safety, and we had the opportunity to go and discuss this motion in kind of a draft form, and it was unanimously voted on in support from our membership. So as a full backing of the Brow RA. So kind of on some of that discussion and kind of what transpired. First, I just say that kind of really need to go and start with the end in mind here and kind of what has transpired. There was 28 deaths in Westminster. The majority of those in my neighborhood specifically, a lot of the people here I'm sure are from the Brow of the Hill residents area, and there's just horrific stories and putting kind of a human face on kind of what actually transpired. Some of what was been written about in newspapers about how desperate folks were, the effect on first responders, just systems being completely overwhelmed. And I think we're thinking about the end result here, that is something that should never happen again. It shouldn't have happened in the first place, and we need to go and look at all possible solutions around this. I think that this motion and putting a maximum temperature is very little to ask, all things considered, for looking at kind of what's in stake in terms of loss of life, basic human dignity, the ability to go and have housing that is fit for living. Other parts of the discussion that we had, we appreciated that the framing of this was around having that maximum maximum temperature. My understanding is that there are some similar motions that went to UBCM that were controversial and maybe did not pass, and part of that was the view that that air conditioning perhaps should be mandatory, and it was looked as potentially a luxury. We're not talking about a luxury. We're talking about, having a habitable, temperature and the protection of human life. So, very much appreciated, kind of that, that wording. Also appreciated the language around rent evictions, that being a very real issue. And to be honest, before hearing some of the other delegates tonight, I don't think I fully understood how large of an issue that was, and how much pressure was being put on, some of those kind of, in these situations. Maybe the final part of that discussion, I think it was noted that it may be appropriate to kind of call on other levels of government for support as well. And since we had that meeting in July, the provincial government did come forward with the kind of grant program. So we would see this as kind of a full court press, where it's not about kind of one program versus the other. It's about having the bylaw, having the the programs in place, whatever support is possible. But again, keep starting with that end in mind of kind of where we want to ultimately get to, and it's time to go and figure this out. Kind of it can't wait. I think it's very kind of appropriate for New Westminster to be taking the lead in this. I think there's another comment about this being kind of ground zero for the kind of heat dome crisis and the results. So I think it's very appropriate for New Westminster to go and take the lead with the bylaw. So with that, that's my comments.
Thank you for your comments, and I do not see any other questions from council, so I thank you for your time and for your presentation. Folks, that is the end of public delegations. I just want to have one discussion quickly with council. We've already adjusted our agenda to put item 3.6, which was the first delegation topic, next on the agenda. I would ask council, I think I need a universal consensus from council to make further change to the agenda, but I'm suggesting maybe we change the topic, since we've had so many delegates on the topic, whatever it is, it's 8.1. 8.1 is the motion of cooling equipment in rental units. If we could move that right after 3.6, because we have a number of items pulled from the consent agenda. I don't want, and we have a lot of people in this room. I may not want to sit around for 3 hours while we go through that. So you move that, change the agenda, moved and seconded. Councillor Fontaine?
Your worship, while I appreciate the spirit of this, I think this is the second time now that when a larger group of delegates come in, council has just rearranged its agenda midstream to accommodate the debate to be happening while individuals are here. So I'm concerned that either we have a process and we have a procedure to set our agenda, or we don't. And to be amending it on the fly now, this is the second time in the last number of months that this is being attempted to happen. And I'm concerned about that. I think we have an agenda. I think we should just go through with the agenda as planned. So.
Okay, I would assert that I think it's courteous to the people who showed up to council to have a chance to hear us have the debate while they're present, but if they need to stick around. I just want to get a clarity on the procedures from the clerk. If we want to change the agenda, do we need a consensus? Do we need 2/3? Do we need majority vote? What would be the motion? There is a motion moved and seconded, so I just want to clarify what we need.
It's on the agenda. It's just a case of where it falls on the agenda. So it would just be a majority vote to move the place in which it falls. If it wasn't on the agenda, it would require unanimity. But it is on the agenda, so it just requires a majority vote. Okay, so majority would have to vote. So the motion on the floor is to move it to after item 4. Move item 8.1 after item 3.6. Any other comments or questions?
Well, the only comment I'd make, your worship, is I hope moving into the future that if other delegations come forward and we have a lot of people, that council will be as amenable to us moving the agenda around to do that, because I noticed that on a couple of occasions it's happened. It's happening again tonight, and I don't think it should be a pattern that we should be amending agendas midstream. Just with all due respect to everybody here, we have an agenda for a reason. So
I appreciate that. I can't fetter future council, but I appreciate those comments. I understand the concern. Thank you. So the motion. So all in favor of the amendment? All opposed? It's carried with Councillors Fontaine and Minhouse opposed. So the next on the agenda is 3.612 K to K Clark Boulevard trees. Sorry, folks, I wanted to have a break at 9, but I think we should get through item number 8 in order to, as a lot of folks are stayed up late to see this today, so I want to give them a chance to hear what we have to say. So item 8.1 is a motion for discussion decision cooling equipment in rental units submitted by Councillors Henderson and Nakagawa. One of you two may read the resolved and motivate. Councillor Nakagawa.
Thanks. Therefore be it resolved that City Council directs staff to explore the tools available for the city to adopt a bylaw that requires rental tools. It's getting late, obviously. I can't even read this on my screen. Rental units to have cooling equipment or passive means that prevents at least one room of the unit from exceeding the standard recommendation of 26 degrees Celsius or 79 Fahrenheit. Be it further resolved that the city write a letter to the Minister of Housing to request clarification and confirmation that these upgrades would not trigger legal rent eviction or the above guidelines rent increase permissible by the province.
Is there a seconder? You may motivate.
Thank you. As some folks mentioned, this motion does come from the conversation that happened at the Lower Mainland Local Government Association conference back in April, I think. And there was a resolution that came from the city of Port Moody that we asked the province to bring these bylaws into the Residential Tenancy Act, which I do think they should be there. But that was not supported by our colleagues around the region, so that will not be going forward to UBCM. So Tasha and I got together to discuss, well then if our colleagues in the region are not willing to take action or aren't even willing to ask the province to take action, what can we do here locally? Because we do know that people died, members of our community died in the heat dome, and that these extreme weather events will only continue to get worse over the years. We have to agree that tenants have the right to livable housing. We just have to fundamentally agree that that is true as a starting point. When other ideas have come forward on how to solve this problem, which we all, I think, agree is a problem, there have been ideas or what the province recommended. And the difficulty with that is that if you talk to tenants, they will tell you that those solutions haven't worked. Because, the example of my previous place where I used to live, which was in the brow of the hill, the neighborhood that had the highest rates of death, I only had a sliding glass door. And a standard cooling unit, air conditioning unit, would not have worked in that unit. So I would have needed something custom, or I would have needed to block it with like a piece of plywood, for example. So when we talk about viewpoints, I wouldn't have been able to see outside. I've recently moved downtown, and in my new tenancy agreement, there is a provision that I'm not allowed an air conditioner. So this should not be allowed in any tenancy agreement, and it should not be allowed that landlords can intimidate tenants into not having them. We need access to this by right, and it needs to be the responsibility of the landlords because of the fact that it needs to suit the unit. We don't want to give a prescriptive solution, which is that every tenant gets an air conditioner. That might not be the solution in that housing setup. Maybe it is heat pumps, maybe it is painting roofs, maybe it is, making spaces around the building that provide shade. I don't know what the answer is for each independent building, but we need to say that this is a problem and that it's on the landlords to solve this. It's also crucial that this is in each unit. It can't just be in the building. In the building is a great solution. Our emergency management department is working on that. But some folks can't even leave their unit, perhaps because of physical disability, mental health issue, if we have another pandemic. There's lots of reasons why it needs to be in the individual unit. So in conversation with the people who are most impacted, I think that this is a solution that's needed. I think the province can step in and do more. Absolutely, would be happy to support them. The City of New Westminster has a history of creating guidelines that support tenants' rights that the province then picks up. So I think that this is one more example of that. But again, we have to ensure that tenants have the right to livable units. And this is a crisis situation. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks to all the folks who came out tonight to speak in support of this motion. I was shocked at the delegation list when I got it. And it was a delightful surprise to see so many people out speaking to this. As Councillor Nakagawa said, people deserve to have livable housing. And we know without question that renters in our community are disproportionately impacted by extreme heat events. So this motion is really about equity in my mind. There was a question asked tonight about what can we do to keep seniors cool at night outside of the cooling center, and this motion right here, this to me is what we're trying to do, is to make sure that everyone has access to one cool space in their own unit. As a municipality, we have the regulatory authority to ensure that property owners must heat a unit, as been pointed out, protecting residents against cold weather. As our climate changes, it only makes sense to me to extend this to heat events. And the onus for adequate temperatures needs, in my mind, to be on the property owner, not individual tenants. The livability of a building is the responsibility of property owners, and we have to stop downloading costs from landlords to the city and province, or to the individual to be picking up the tab. I don't think, as has been suggested, that the province ought to pay for landlords to maintain or upgrade their spaces. They run a business, and in my mind, this is an expense that to incur, and it's not an expense for everyone. Some people, some landlords who might have a basement suite, that basement suite might be really cool in the summer. This is not suggesting, as Councillor Nakagawa pointed out, that there's a one-size-fits-all solution. Many spaces might already meet this, or some spaces anyway, depending on what the housing type is. So it's just to ask staff to explore tools that we have and what this would look like. I wanted to thank the Tenants Union for their advocacy to make sure that we include the second piece of this motion, which was to have a conversation with the province around ensuring that we're not, that there aren't some unintended consequences of saying, oh, well, we got to put in a heat pump, so now everybody out. That is certainly not what we're intending to do. And we all know that the most affordable housing we have is the housing that you're in. And so we want to keep people in their homes. So I just wanted to thank them for their advocacy, asking Councillor Nakagawa and I to include a piece of that in the motion, because I think it makes it stronger. I had the pleasure of speaking with Councillor Cameron Croach, I don't know if I'm saying it right, from Hamilton, Ontario, and he spoke about the great work that Acorn did in that community to advocate for the adequate temperature bylaw. And we had a really productive conversation. I think it's promising that other municipalities are moving on this, and that there'll be opportunities to collaborate and troubleshoot and talk about some of the challenges and opportunities as we move forward. So as all of my council colleagues have expressed interest in taking concrete action on this issue in the past few months, I look forward to their unanimous support tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fontaine.
Thank you, Worship. I have sent an amendment to the motion to the clerk. I believe they should have received it by email, so I would like to move an amendment to the motion. I thought I was being more efficient by emailing it, but perhaps I could just read it out. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So did you want me to motivate or speak to the amendment once I get a seconder, Your Worship? That might speed up the process, or?
I would suggest that you read the resolved, and then
Okay.
if you have a seconder, motivate, yes.
Yeah. So I'll read the amendment to the motion, which is, I believe, in the yellow portion and part, yeah, that part as well. So the yellow portion is being added, and that the province would be open to providing direct or indirect financial incentives to support the retrofitting. Oops. and that the province would be open to providing direct or indirect financial incentives to support the retrofitting of older buildings to accommodate this initiative, and be it further resolved that the estimated cost to landlords associated with implementing this initiative be brought to the attention of council, and be it further resolved that tenants' rights organizations and the BC Landlords Association be consulted to obtain their feedback prior to the implementation of any pilot project. So that's the amendment to the motion, and if that amendment were to be approved, I would be supporting the entire motion, but I'll seek a seconder for the amendment.
There's a seconder. Do you have further motivation?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Your Worship. And like my colleagues, we've had many discussions in this chamber, one of which was an initiative that Councillor Minas and I brought forward to try to initiate and to spearhead and accelerate the access to air conditioners within our own community, doing what we can within our own city of New Westminster to have, you know, areas, and I agree with my colleagues, not just a cooling center during the day, which you can access, but when you're sleeping at night, you can actually sleep in a room that is, actually habitable. A few comments on this. I think it's important that whenever we bring these motions forward, that we try to, as best as possible, think of the potential unintended consequences, first of all, and secondly, that we've consulted and done a 360 consultation so that we've actually done the work to hear from everyone so that we do potentially deal with the unintended consequences of passing a motion. And I think that the amendments are in the spirit of the motion. They don't take away from any of the motion. It'll just allow us to get some additional information as a result of that, if that was to be approved. But I do have, Your Worship, a couple of, I have a question actually for our fire department as well as perhaps to some other staff. So I'll just ask if I can for our fires chief to come forward if possible. Could you comment to council just in terms of electrical fires and around electrical risk of overcharging or overusage within older buildings? Can you, as senior staff within the fire department, speak to attending those types of fires? Is this a risk or a concern that the fire department has around potential overuse of electrical within older buildings?
Well, we've had.
Oh, sorry, Brad, are you there?
Oh, you got it, Aaron? We got the fire chief online. Okay, sorry, Brad, you've been.
Oh, sorry.
There's one more swipe online.
I promoted you without, yeah. Sorry.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor. What we see with electric loads in the older buildings is that the way they're designed is that the breaker systems are supposed to trip when the systems are overloaded. So when they're overloaded, the breaker trips and cuts the power to the unit. We did look at several different options. One of them was that we would retrofit a plug that would be able to unplug the stove and then plug the air conditioner to that temporarily just to cool the unit. And that would be that would replace the load of the stove on the electrical system and redirect it to the air conditioner. So that's one thing we were looking at, but we haven't explored that too far yet. Hopefully that answers your question.
To a certain degree, I was just wanting a general understanding of the concern in the city that has a lot of older buildings about the potential, for example, of suddenly installing 30 air conditioning units in a building that doesn't have the electrical load to be able to manage that, if that's a concern from a fire perspective.
Yeah, I think anytime that a retrofit of that nature would be put in place, there would have to be a load test by a certified electrician. So that would have to be done by qualified personnel, and that's not really our area. But anytime you increase electrical load and capacity in the system, yeah, there is a concern for potential fire issues.
Okay, thank you. Just in closing, I guess for me, this amendment, I heard Councillor, I think it was Councillor Henderson said, this should all be on the landlords. Well, we built these buildings, they built these buildings many years ago under a certain set of rules. And that rule was to provide a heating, making sure that there was a minimum heat, not a minimum cooling. Our world has changed, so we understand that things have changed, but those buildings have not. They were built in a different era, in a different time, and there's going to be, I anticipate, if this motion passes and we get the consultation, there will be some identified costs associated to that, and that's why I'm moving that forward. So to just say, well, it's on the landlords, they have to pay the costs. At the end of the day, the landlords, well, typically what they do is they pass those costs along to the renters. So if somebody leaves a unit and somebody moves into that unit, that unit is gonna go higher in rent because of the fact that the landlord has costs. The costs just don't disappear. They get typically passed, unfortunately, off to the renters. So we're looking at potentially, I think, unintended consequence of actually, if there is no program in place to support and assist on the upgrades, that we're looking at some potentially increased rent. I'll also note of great interest as well that this council only a few weeks ago prior to the break did support a fund from the province to provide assistance to private enterprises that were impacted by vandalism and crime. And that received unanimous support in this council, and that was for private businesses who were being impacted kind of post-COVID. So we already have an example just even recently of that support. So I'm encouraging, if we're gonna try to hopefully get to full unanimous support, I'm encouraging all of council to support this amendment, which I think further strengthens the motion, doesn't take anything away from it, and then we can move forward and hopefully hear back from the province. But just in closing, the one other concern I have is around the second part of the be it further resolved. I think we need to address that before we do the first be it resolved, because if in fact this could trigger rent evictions, we wouldn't want to be going down a road until that is addressed. So there's a bit of quirkiness on the timing, but notwithstanding that, I'm prepared to support it as amended.
Thank you. We are speaking strictly to the amendment right now. Councillor Campbell.
So I won't be supporting the amendment, largely because the original motion presented by councillors Nakagawa and Henderson, in my opinion, really was for me, the priority was centering the tenants and the tenants' support and the tenants' options for the tenants and livability for the tenants. All of that is what, for me, was the piece and the important part of that original motion. And then obviously what we heard today, in addition to knowing, the percentage of our renters living in our community. I mean, there's a number of reasons I won't go into because it's getting late, but I won't be supporting this motion because I feel like it takes us off track. And I would like to have staff work on how we can support the renters in this, and then a conversation around how to prioritize the renters. So I won't be supporting this. I think it takes us off track. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McAvoy.
I don't really mind knowing if there's potential issues, but I do feel like we know what Landlords BC is going to say. But I want to point out that the housing minister has already made it clear that people can install air conditioners unless it's prohibited in their tenancy agreement. So we're really talking about buildings where air conditioners have been prohibited. In my building, air conditioners are prohibited, but nobody really knows why, other than the aesthetic concern of what air conditioners look like. It's not, though, against the rules for me to use the electrical load to use a room air conditioner, which is not visible from the outside. It's not against the rules to plug in some cool humidifiers. So those are some of the things I did, but there are other, it just seems like from the statement of the minister that there's not really an issue there in terms of electrical load in older buildings. And I think of Christmas, which is Christmas trees being one of the most dangerous things for fire. And I think, well, we have Christmas tree load in the winter. We might have air conditioner load in the summer. And I think, I'm trying to remember the figure I think I read somewhere about what that actual electrical load is from an individual air conditioner, but I'm sorry, I can't quite place it.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, have you spoken to the amendment yet? You have not. So Councillor Henderson is next in the queue.
Thanks. This motion really is about centering tenants. So I'll just walk through the three additions or the three parts of the amendment and my thoughts on them. The first around the province being open to providing direct or indirect financial incentives. A quick Google search tells me that there are some programs already in existence. Energy Efficiency Retrofit Program, Clean Homes BC, Fortis BC has some. Province doubles Clean BC home energy retrofit rebates. I think some of these exist. I think that that's a conversation that would come after. This is really about exploring what would this look like? What would this look like for us to require this in new builds, which we haven't talked about. We've been talking about retrofitting, but really this would be about new buildings as well as possible retrofits and what that looks like and what the loopholes are. And if it is that everyone, suddenly gets evicted, like we would put the brakes on and think about how to approach this differently. So I don't think we're just exploring what this would look like in practice and what would be required from a resource standpoint from the city to do something like this. Landlords already have a business license, so it would require some resources of staff to go around and check, and what would that look like? That, to me, that is what we're doing here, is sort of a feasibility study of what this would entail. If it is, I am all for retrofitting older buildings because I think that those are really, really important stock. I just don't think that it is, that's where we're at right now with this stage of this motion. The estimated cost to landlords, I can think of someone in my neighborhood with a basement suite, and that cost would be zero. And the cost to someone who needed a complete renovation on their multifamily unit would be substantial. And so I don't feel like it's the best use of staff resources at this time to come back with sort of a plethora of like, well, if we had to plant 3 trees, it would be this much. And if they had to put in 20 air conditioners, it would be this much. And a whole, these buildings are so different. I think that would be a lot of staff resources to try to figure out what the variance in costs would be. And again, at the stage where this motion is at, I don't think that that's necessary. The tenants' rights organizations, absolutely, we're in conversation with. We went to them with a draft, wanting their collaboration and input. I think this conversation around landlord cost is what prevented this is what some of my colleagues from the region, and I think also prevented a unanimous vote from this council at the Lower Mainland Local Government Association on moving Port Moody's motion forward, was about this impact to landlords. And I think, again, this, in the spirit of this motion, is really centering tenant right and equity. So I won't be supporting this amendment. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fontaine, still on the amendment.
Yes. Just to be clear that this amendment is about making sure we make decisions in the context of having the full gamut of information, not just guessing or hoping on a wish and a prayer that we know what this is going to cost or what the potential unintended consequences are. And we also, I think, all equally agree that if for some reason this were to be passed and then a landlord were to say, well, I can't afford to do the electrical upgrades, I'm done. I'm out of being a landlord. I'm, kicking everybody out. I mean, I don't think anybody wants that. I think we want to be able to explore if these buildings were built in the older times where there was no air conditioning in it, that if for some reason, and by the way, the programs that were referenced just a moment ago, they wouldn't, in my opinion, and you can ask anyone who's done any construction, they will not cover the cost of a complete electrical upgrade in a building. Absolutely not. So they may touch on a little bit on the surface, but not the actual full amount of that. So I guess what I'm a little bit confused of is 2 things. One is I heard tonight that this now only applies to new buildings, but when I read that motion, Councillor Henderson, you just indicated that this is basically the thrust of it was for new units, but that doesn't, the motion doesn't say that. So
Okay, we shouldn't have crosstalk, but point taken. That was.
Thank you. So perhaps I misunderstood, but I thought what I heard Councillor Henderson say was that the primary thrust of this is about new builds, but the motion doesn't say anything about primary thrust or new builds. It's just to all buildings. It'll apply to all buildings. Secondly, if we want to save staff a lot of time and a lot of work, perhaps and I'm not proposing this, but perhaps the second part of the motion should be what we actually move forward first. Let's find out from the province if there are any issues that'll trigger rent evictions, because I know nobody wants that here. And let's make sure if that's the case, then why would we be doing bylaws that are not going to be able to be implemented and sending staff all around town trying to do work on something that the province?
You're speaking to the regular motion, to the main motion now, not the resolution.
My apologies. Okay, but that's why that amendment has been put forward, to be able to make sure that we address that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no more questions, I will call the vote on the amendment. All in favor? All opposed? It is defeated with Councillors Henderson, Nakagawa, McAvoy, Campbell, and Mayor Johnstone opposed. Back to the main motion, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. I would do more fulsome, but we're all tired, but obviously commend Councillors Nakagawa and Henderson on the research and engaging the community on this and the leadership on this, so thank you. I do want to just, and I won't amend the motion, but I do want to say it would be really, really ideal if this work can happen so that it can somehow be in place for next summer, right? Because I don't know how we can do that, but that's just a hope, because enough, like, we really need to move forward. And then the last thing is just as a note, I'd like to be able to, for staff, like, because it did get, as we heard, defeated at the Lower Mainland Local Government Association, a similar motion. I'd like to make sure that it's on our radar that we bring this forward again to the Lower Mainland Local Government Association when it's time to bring forward motions for consideration. I just don't want it to just go lost. Like, it should be brought forward again and again and again. Thank you.
Councillor Fontaine.
Your Worship, I have a further amendment to the motion, and the motion as amended would take the second part of the motion, be it further resolved that the city write a letter to the Minister of Housing to request clarification and confirmation that these upgrades would not trigger legal rent evictions or the above guideline rent increase permissible by the province. And once we have received that confirmation, that City Council directs staff to explore the tools available. So it would be effectively a timing thing, so we get that initial confirmation first before we send staff off doing a lot of work, potentially exploring tools and doing all the things that my colleagues said they don't want staff doing. So that's the amendment.
Okay, the highlighting has been defeated. So the question is to go back to that. It's a new amendment to shift the second half of the amendment first and say that it will be done before the second half of the amendment, before the first half of the amendment is done. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was a couple of, let's cut and paste and then I can add it in, yeah. So it would read the first part and then say, upon that confirmation, that City Council directs staff. So it would be all one, it wouldn't be two, be it resolves, it would all be one motion, but just that we would confirm the top part before we move forward on the second part.
There's a seconder. Would you like to motivate or more?
No, I think it's self-explanatory. I just think rather than, let's get that clarity from the province first and make sure that there will not be any rent evictions. And then at that stage, we can then start allocating staff time to looking at drafting bylaws and looking at extra tools.
Councillor Nakagawa.
We need to get moving on this. If the province comes back and does not confirm that, then we'll have to find a way around it. This isn't we'll only do it if, it's we will find a way around this. So no, I don't support that. We have to get staff moving on the work of developing this. I don't know how long the province would take to confirm that. So no, I don't support holding off on this.
Councillor Fontaine.
Well, I will note to Councillor Nakagawa, it's been 2 years since the heat dome and nothing has happened up until a few months ago, so.
Point of order. This city has done a lot in the 2 years since.
I'm referring to the province, Your Worship. I didn't mention this.
And there are provinces taken action since the heat dome.
Sorry.
But it's
I'm
not
sure what
relevant,
we're
but it's not relevant to this discussion, so thank you. Please continue with your comments.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate the interruption. If you look at the amendment as proposed, it's asking for us simply to get that confirmation. I don't think, I mean, I could check with the city manager, but I don't think getting a confirmation on whether or not this type of a bylaw or these types of tools would result in renovictions should be that difficult or that time consuming to take place. Secondly, why would we, if we get confirmation from the province that this will trigger renovictions? I'm sorry, I don't know if I heard correctly, but I don't want to support something being moved forward if it's going to trigger renovictions. A workaround, I don't know how the city would be able to work around provincial laws and provincial regulations. So I'm a bit confused as to how we would be sending staff to work on something knowing or not knowing whether or not it's going to trigger renovictions. That, I don't know what's so complicated about it. I'm just asking that we get that confirmation first and then we move forward. We've been 2 years since the heat dome. If it took a few more weeks, given we're going into the fall, to get this confirmation would save staff a lot of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
I don't support the amendment. We need all the tools in our toolbox to move forward quickly. We have in our council agenda today an accelerated climate action plan, and like Councillor Nakagawa, we need to move quickly, and I don't think we can get mired in this kind of, what ifs, what do we do? So, no, I won't support it.
Okay, seeing no more questions or concerns on the amendment, I will call the question. All in favor?
Oh, sorry. No.
All opposed? It is defeated with Councillors Nakagawa, Henderson, Campbell, McAvoy, and Mayor Johnstone opposed. To the main motion. Are there any more speakers to the main motion? Councillor Fontaine.
Thank you, Your Worship. Once again, an effort to try to just make some positive changes and some clarification and get some context. And once again, that's defeated 5-2. So here we go. We're back at it again, and we're down a road where even simple recommendations are not accepted based on party lines. Anyways, I
Councillor Fontaine, I would ask you to check your language to be more respectful to the. Councillor Fontaine, it's a point of order.
I don't have a point of order.
I am making a point of order.
Okay.
I'm asking that you keep your comments respectful to the motivations of your colleagues around this council table. That was clearly not respectful to your colleagues around this table. Thank you.
I challenge the chair, Your Worship. I'm sorry, but a comment about a vote on party lines is not respectful of my colleagues.
That is exactly.
I challenge the chair on that motion. That's ridiculous.
Clerk, would you like to lead us through this process?
So what happens next is you have to ask whether or not the chair shall be sustained in regards to your interpretation of the point of order and the challenge to the chair. And then there can be no debate. Council votes on whether or not the chair shall be sustained, and then we move on from there.
Thank you. Council, will the chair be sustained? All in, the answer is simply, yeah, voting sorry. Will the chair be sustained? Vote in favor. Are you voting in favor of the chair being sustained?
Are you calling the vote now?
I am calling the vote. All opposed? Chair is sustained with Councillors Minhas and Fontaine opposed. Councillor Fontaine, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So back to the motion itself. I will support the motion. It's not the motion that I think should have been going to the province. It's not the motion that will help to look at exploring all the tools. And it's definitely not a motion that will get the province to think about the fact that there may be some issues with some of the landlords in terms of retrofits, which may end up delaying, unfortunately, the implementation of it. So at the end of the day, I will support the motion, but it's definitely not the motion I had hoped that council would have endorsed tonight. Thank you.
Councillor McAvoy.
I just want to mention in terms of complicating it or additional issues, those can be talked about. I feel skeptical about it, but we have 2 legislative sessions before the next summer. Unless it's already planned, this is not likely to get onto the fall legislative session, which means we're targeting spring. We're not targeting August. We're targeting a decision that would likely be made in December about what gets included in the legislative session in the spring. So in terms of how the provincial government works, we're actually only talking about a few months' time if we're going to get this on the government agenda and before the legislature. And that would be a reason why to resist complicating it and let the government deal with those government will have consultations. Our task is to get this decision that's probably going to be made by December, that the government will put this on the legislative agenda for the spring.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, I will speak to the main motion. You know, in New Westminster, we have been innovative in the past in protecting renters, including using our business licensing laws to regulate what the Residential Tenancy Act has failed to regulate. And much of our work to protect vulnerable people from future heat emergencies has relied on us providing incentives or direct public health interventions, and those have honestly taken us as far as they can right now. At some point, people who own housing and rent out housing and make money renting out housing need to be held responsible for providing safe housing. We regulate that all housing must have fire protection. We regulate that all housing must have heating. We regulate that it must have a safe electrical system. When the heat dome became the biggest mass death event in this city, I think we need to vote like regulating cooling is as important as any of the above. And so that's why I support this. I hope that we can find an innovative tool to make this work here in the city. And if the province wants to follow us along in that, they can. But I hope we can actually find, once again, a way to lead on this. So I do support this. I thank the councillors for bringing it forward. And I call the question. All in favor? All opposed? The motion is adopted. Council, I'm going to ask us to take about a 10-minute break or so until 10 o'clock before we come back to the next items on the agenda, which will be the consent agenda.